We're fortunate enough to have my dean, Lori Chesley, here tonight. I tip my hat to you. One of those people that made this conference possible, and without whose cooperation it would not happen. As I've said before, I had people from all across this college make this possible, and this is our last event. I'm very, very thankful for being able to work at a school where everybody from custodians and food personnel all the way to the president have kicked in and said, Cope, you got something good here, run with it, and we're going to have your back. I can't emphasize enough how important that is if you're ever going to have a school where extraordinary things can happen. The thing that I've looked at is, I hope you'll bear with me for a minute. We haven't met all our benchmarks in terms of numbers, but we've done something respectable enough to be accepted by the Makaka people. But if I were to talk about what I have seen over this week, is an enormous amount of poets ranging from those who know. There's some who've come out of the woodwork who weren't even on the scene except in their little private rooms. There's people that have been networking with each other, but not with other people that are in different groups. This week, I've seen them talking back and forth and making plans. I'm hoping I can get all the people that came in. In fact, I did that in the open reading this afternoon. The idea that they need to get together at a place like Literary Life Bookstore, sit down, figure out how they can set up their own publishing setups so that they don't have to depend on others, develop a network, and then expand it from beyond here to elsewhere, as my generation did. Eric Granke and I have made a career out of getting these things out elsewhere, and I think that's how you get things going when you're talking about a scene and a network. There are those poets that basically will send out individually here, there, and everywhere, but building a scene is what really gets things going. And if we have people here talking and arguing, fighting, staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning, doing all sorts of strange illicit drugs, etc., I'm not advocating that. You're going to wind up, if you're talking about those things and sharing your work, you're going to wind up down the road with an incredible body of work that comes from people that share. I've seen some readings that have practically burned my ears off this week. Some of you may remember Azizi Jasper last night. My ears are still ringing. I'm hoping we can get him to come and speak at our learning day, because one of the things my department is very much interested in is getting some African-American professors in our department that are male. We're also looking at the idea of what we need to do, no matter what our background is, to reach students from other backgrounds from our own, because as with a lot of English departments, we are predominantly white, and in this case, predominantly female. We have to be able to reach across and find the students that we haven't been able to find right now, because the whole project here at this college is to help people get on the ladder so that they can be successful, go to university, get yourself that degree, make enough money so you can have the life that everybody else takes for granted. Enough said. Hats off now. 3 readers tonight. And of course, the drill's the same as it has been before. You got these sheets in front of you. Don't pay any attention to the subtitles. I screwed that up the first night, and it's been screwed up ever since, so I'm going to do this all by hand. What I'm going to need you to do at the end of the night is write an assessment of this thing. I have to have a head count of how many people are here so that we can total up the count and say, yes, we made our benchmark, or no, we didn't. Okay? I hope you get some of my craziness. Anyways, I've been going for 4 12-hour days. I'm stupid as hell tonight, so bear with me. We're going to start with Miriam Peterson. I've known Miriam for a long, long time, and I guess my admiration for her began when she went to Ireland and wrote that absolutely stunning collection of poems about her experiences there. She brought Ireland back to the United States with her. They're poems that I have always treasured. In fact, when I was going to edit the anthology, I asked her specifically for those poems because I'm crazy about them. But she also has a long career of collaborating with her husband, Ron, artwork and poetry together. The interesting thing about that is if you look at those kinds of collaborations, ekphrasis as it's known in the field, Normally speaking, what happens is the artist makes a piece of work and the poet responds to it, as in, say, for example, The Marriage of Peleus and Thetis by Catullus, or Dante's Cornice of Pride in Purgatorio, and I could name hundreds of others. When these two came and gave their session, the thing I picked up on was sometimes he would be halfway through a piece and her poem would be the thing that helped her complete it. So you had the poem or the sculptor responding back to what the poet had done, which is really different. I came away going, this is interesting. Okay, and from the standpoint of creation. Other than that, she has a chapbook, This Brief Light, and I'm waiting for there to be a full-size volume down the road. Miriam Peterson.
Thank you, David, and thank you so much for organizing this incredible week of conference. There's a word that I hardly ever use, and it's indefatigable, and it's a word that describes David Cope, and really appreciate his hard work on this. And also, Lori Chesley, thank you for your help on this, and it's a pleasure to be reading with Linda and Lou tonight. I'm going to begin with some poems that are seasonal, that deal with spring, but not always having the feeling of the renewal, the chipper spring idea. There are some nuances here. This one, The Way I Hear It, it's titled, and in it figures my husband with a broken ankle, and it made me start thinking about breaking things and how most of the poets reading in this wonderful conference are about the age when we start breaking things and falling down. And so this poem is for all of us. The Way I Hear It. The first burgers grilled this spring, anticipated like weekends and sizzling under cover. My husband hangs around the scene, biding time with his tin whistle, shooting an Irish jig, then an old hymn, into the green of May. His broken ankle nearly mended, his spirits rising like the temperatures. Slick ice of winter, old hoodwinker. The slipping, falling, breaking people are finding their way back to rhythm. They have learned the patience of bones and stand at their grills humming or tapping or trilling a tune while petals fall like snow. The waiting room tedium has ended, the cast removed, the burgers are done, and my husband once again makes music. This one is titled March 2003, and I think you will recognize the time when I read the poem. A terrible time in the Middle East that continues. And in this poem, we move back and forth, alternate settings. So I'll kind of pause a little bit between those settings. March 2003. Tonight, my son unwraps 32 vessels he has thrown and glazed and fired. He sets them one by one on our table, eyeing them for flaws or surprises. He is the age of those young men now straining to see through a sandstorm, trying to stay alive in a desert. The bowls, mugs, and vases gleam with colors of the earth, their pure forms comforting the room. I imagine their rooms, like my son's, littered with CDs, old skateboards, wacky posters and signs, renderings of superheroes, pop cans, books, magazines, recruitment brochures. Centering is the best part, he has told me. You can feel the moment when your hands become still, when the clay defies gravity. Boys remain boys so much longer than they used to, everyone keeps saying. They live at home without a plan, work dead-end jobs, grow restless and drink too much. These vessels will hold food and water and flowers, or simply fill a room, with beauty. One mother displays a framed photograph of her son. His uniform, square jaw, and steady look, not far removed from the childhood face now breaking her heart. I listen to the sounds pots make fresh from the kiln, a music like no other. Ping, ping, tiny chimes that play time's sad and ancient tune. Now a happier one. This is titled Puddle, and maybe it'll take you back. Under the swing, after the rain, before you grow up, beyond this town, beneath your shoes, between your knees, between the chains, in rippling sky, in rippling mud inside your head, with dreamy swoosh, with shimmering souls, with face in clouds, as mother calls, from far away through sheets of wind, behind the door, till you jump down into the splash, into the world. I'll just move us a little bit into summer. And this one, again, has some ambivalence in it, titled Crop Duster. Wings graze the backs of cattle, barn roof shaking in the drone. Such swooping grace attracts vacationers passing on Highway 56. Jerry hangs his feet out the backseat window, Mom's yelling at him to close. Melissa has to pee, no rest stop in sight. Dad spots the crop duster, tells everyone to look how close it comes to crashing, how great it would be to dive like that. Harm is nowhere and everywhere in the heartland, where folks are quick to help you out when your car breaks down or you have lost your way. So much can flourish under a chemical sky. The family on the road, now eating their packed sandwiches, can look ahead to a week at the lake, air mattresses afloat. The farmer can expect a bumper crop. The duster can weave and skim over this year's soybeans with precarious ease. Now I will read a few poems about Ireland. My husband and I have taken students there for a semester for 5 different times, starting in 1992, and we've had increments between, but the last time we went was 2009, and so these came out of that particular time in Ireland. And I'm going to start with kind of a lead into this idea of being displaced, what it's like to be in a different environment, how we view ourselves in that different environment. It's titled Shedding. In another country, words overflow the brim. You can't drink them fast enough. Smells of crumbling, burning earth, velvet flavors, rich and dangerous on the tongue, permeate each day. Your quick hand hesitates, forgetting its timing, fumbling the easy pitch, the handshake, the gesture. You are the foreigner trying to shed the too warm coat of your homeland, trying to manage in your own skin. So these cottages we stay in with all of these students are very drafty, and they have slate floors, and they're cold, and so when you get up in the morning, it's a terrible thing. And but from these cottages, you can see the most remarkable scenery, and one of the scenes is a mountain range called the 12 Bends, and that figures into this poem titled Re-Entry. And by the way, it's the place where I sleep the best. It's just amazing. Even though we're across from the pub where all of our students are carousing, somehow I sleep well. Ireland, my deepest living sleep, I owe to your down-filled winter nights. But each waking is a mortal effort to comfort, but each waking is a mortal effort to confront your bone-chilling slates, your verbal and liquid requirements. Reasons to re-enter the wide-awake world seem few and thin when the unconscious drifts in a green field dense in the rhythms of safety. I need a cue, a rallying sign to draw me from this tour bus of sleep. Someone rustling a cereal box, kegs thumping from a delivery truck outside the pub. Back to sleep then, until the banshee of the 12 bins hurls me from this bed, points a crooked finger at my heart, and makes me swear to wide awake in such a lucky land as this. Well, we're still in the Lenten season for a little while more, and this one's titled Lenten Season Begins in Ireland. Ash Wednesday and the sky, an unabashed frenzy of clouds and blackbirds, stirs up your mind, so intent on quiet contemplation, on sacrifice. The road to Lettergesh is dizzy with cars, and you step off the road in time to catch sight of an old man with a scythe, arrhythmically cutting the long, bristly grass of his field, a staged picture postcard, or a truth come home on this day when labor doesn't cease, or aging, or need, or the wandering mind, unable to hold still for death to inscribe its mercy on your forehead. My dad passed away in October after having lived a very long and fruitful life. He died at 94. And in the last 12 years after my mother's death, we became really good friends. And before that, it was my dad, and then it became my friend. And we really enjoyed sharing books, talking a lot. And so when we were in Ireland, I would call him. And this is just to give a little setting. Of course, we arrive always in Ireland in January during the most blustery time. And we came at the time of the inauguration of Barack Obama. And so there was some real exciting moments in the pub because of that. But this idea of Obama coming into the presidency figures into this poem titled Talking to Dad from the West of Ireland. Winds howl off the Atlantic. Our turf fire offers its limited comfort. The connection is good, though his voice wavers like the flames. He is letting go of this world, and I want him to hang on. A new president, a new hope, Dad, an FDR to fix it all. I want him to believe we will be okay. And from this vantage far away, it seems a possibility. Sheep graze in their slow way high on the postcard hill, and the locals still weave their stories face to face despite the internet. Something yet can happen, Dad. A break in the clouds, a full rainbow, one end on the mountaintop, the other in the lake below. And so, in your nursing home room, breathe some more days for me, for you, for the cliches that sustain our sure voices over the Atlantic. I'm working on a series about this female professor who was kind of crazy female professor. And I know a lot about her. And so I'll just read a couple of the poems that I'm working on for this. This one's called Higher Education. The grades are figured now in neat and even rows. Her students go their separate summer ways, marching to their iPhone's magic tunes. She snaps dead wood from the old forsythia, a breaking satisfaction, a clear decision made in the muddle of final blossoms. What has she taught these many years? What works under this unanticipated sky? Perseverant shoots, unfolding leaves, insist their way into the broken world against all odds, against all GPAs. Now, I torture my students. I teach a lot of poetry classes, and I torture my students by making them write in forms like sestinas and villanelles. And in this case, this is this crazy female teacher forcing her students to try a sonnet. This is called Poetic Forms. Try a sonnet this time, keeping true to your own voice. No poetic diction, please. The professor has spoken, and the students begin their 14 lines as if this prompt were reasonable, as if the sonnet, brief, prescribed, unfolded like a bath towel and absorbed emotion, cleverness, music, a heartbeat. Jason wonders if iambic pentameter is required. Audrey thinks the form is easy and finishes it off like a sandwich. The professor looks over the drafts, checking for sparks, a graceful turn. Her hair needs cutting, her nails a clipping. She could use a good night's sleep. No time for the body, she laments, as love and longing rise from the pages, handwritten as if meant for her. One of the assignments that I've given my poetry class is to write a poem, but you have to begin this way, by writing 3 adjectives, 3 nouns, and 3 verbs, and try to think of words that are particularly interesting in their sound. And then with those 9 words, you have to write a poem about your heart. But they don't know that until they write their 9 words, and they have to use them. So I thought I'd better try it myself. And of course, that wasn't fair because I already knew that it was going to be about my heart. So, so this is it, my heart. It is an error to call my heart only a precious mitten of feeling, kindness, or containment. My heart is also the limping iceman calling out in the pale morning. Sometimes my heart bucks and kicks in its meager stall, a space too small for its thumping desire. Call my heart an ornamental flower, an old shoe, a beloved uncle, and I will beat you out of my system. Okay, I'm going to step here just to check the time. Good. I have a couple to read from our exhibit catalog for one of our collaborations that David talked about. And downstairs, if you have a chance to take a look at the exhibit we have there, it's huge steel pieces with plates of steel with the poems on them. So I'd appreciate if you take a look at them. This, you won't be able to see the artworks, but I'll have to say, imagine, if you will. This is the exhibit catalog for Evidence of Things Unseen. That was one of our exhibits. And the pieces are pretty figurative, kind of suggest human beings. And they're made out of, some of them plaster and some of them fiberglass. And so I'm going to read the one titled The Quality of Mercy. This is on display at the Aquinas Library. And you know where that quote came from, I'm sure, the quality of mercy. Her work is wasted, they say, as she tries to lift the weight of sorrow, heavy as a brickyard or a prison gate. What can mercy do beneath this empty sky with her few blankets, her dwindling source of water? How can she turn her solemn face to misery again and again, collecting his tears, hearing him ask to die? Come, she says, I will do what I can. And when I leave you, mark the place where I knelt beside you with a stone, too heavy to cast at your brother. The next one is titled Seeker, and the accompanying sculpture is fiberglass. It's about 7 or 8 feet tall. And here's the poem, Seeker. How long can you go door to door with your puzzles and question marks bearing the day's heavy news on your back? You are called upon to seek until you find, to knock until it opens, to decipher the graffiti of this world. Your work is cut out for you, canvassing this barren land for one small greening, a color that you'd miss if you were not so hungry for its nourishment, its blessing. And finally, from this collection, the poem Becoming, and another fiberglass piece that's been in our front yard. It's had a special place there, and it gets moved around to different spots. Becoming. In the folds of each day, someone waits to enter your life, to appear in person or in a dream and change you slightly, as if a pencil sketch were being drawn of you and a line extended or erased increases your vitality, your presence in the world. Be ready for the entrance of a stranger or a friend who, after an exchange, lingers in the form of words, a look, a gesture, new filaments joining your own, becoming you. I just remember that this is on display with the poems at the diocese downtown, so real close by. All right, so I'll finish with a few from my chapbook, This Brief Light. And this is a kind of a record of a woman's life from the time she's about ready to have children and wondering whether she should bring any children into this crazy world, and then when she becomes a parent to her own parents. And I'll begin with a poem titled Grandmother's Recipes. So this goes back a couple generations. Grandmother's Recipes. I see it yawning on her counter. Its contents filed by those knotted fingers that cradled my childhood face. What she has in mind for the table, the pantry, the cellar, rests somewhere in this box of oak. How to create a rising loaf, transform a rind into sweet translucence. As she lifts a dog-eared card, the ceremony begins. Jars and canisters come forth, and mincing and sautéing cloak me in their fragrant sound. Her concentration is enough to silence the house pets, and I, on the corner stool, never ask to help her. She performs alone, and I play spectator to this day, overseeing the recipes in her absence, reading them without time or skill to do their bidding, and without her certainty that what is held in a small oak box can keep us all together and warm. Now, I talked about my dad, and my mother passed about 12 years before he did, and it seemed that at the time, so many of my friends and acquaintances lost their mothers about the same time. And this poem came about thinking about us all. It's titled Mothers Newly Gone. Our mothers are leaving us. One by one, they flutter through the door as if we had expected it, as if we had prepared for this goodbye. We can hardly follow their recipes. The remedies for flu, for heartache, are somewhere in the cupboard. The names of relatives to be invited are mixed in with the old green stamps. How can we, their busy daughters, sew on patches to make things last? What are we to do with these old compacts, these letters, cards, and cold creams? How will we behave without their disapproving frowns? Their, listen, honey, or, oh, sweetheart. We're standing up straight, we're being kind, and we've sent off all the thank you notes, but they are minding other business beyond the blue, leaving us in middle age to sift through their precious lives for clues to who we are. And I'll end with the poem More Light. When daylight savings time comes around, we get all excited about the sun, taking longer to go down, but then we wake up and it's still dark. What? But then we are looking forward to the solstice and that longest day of the year. So it's titled More Light. It's the last one in this series and the last I'll read for this evening. From our porch, we watch the late June sky pale in that space between sunset and night. Days will shorten now, fans of light closing one by one, a celestial tea party performed by all the heavenly geishas. This is the time I feel least deserving of this life, its cottonwood fluff, its blossoms, its vacation photographs, casual and relaxed as flip-flops. Whatever prompts subtraction of the light will add the dark embroidery of dream to heavy wool of winter nights. Porch furniture stacked, the cushions stored. You and I will accommodate, but not without another loss. A child growing out of the house, a parent, friend, or house pet gone. In this solstice time, we feel eternal, an effortless, short-sleeved ease in leafy greens and friendly barbecues. We own a sweet forgetfulness that leaves will fall, the sun will age our skin, and that this light is ours so briefly on this uncommon earth. Thank you.
Just a point of reference for all of you who are not from GRCC. When a helicopter goes overhead, they're either leaving the hospital to pick up someone in need, or they're bringing someone back who is in to save their life. It's one of those things where if you know that, it's a moment. If you're a person of faith, send up a prayer. If you're not, send up a thought. Linda Nemec Foster. Now, what can I say about Linda Nemec Foster? Linda Nemec Foster fills up rooms. She is our first Grand Rapids Poet Laureate, and I think to some extent, the laureate program, which is in need right now of trying to find some funds from rich people. We're going to try to figure something out about that to make it happen further. But having established this, where we now have 4 of us who have won this award, it creates a history, and that's part of the things I think that's necessary in order to begin building this sense of identity that I've been talking about all this semester, all this week. If we talk about Linda, she laid down the pattern for everybody else. She was the one that came in and defined it, and everybody else has sort of refined it according to what they found with it. Linda has published 9 collections of poetry. She has been published in over 300 literary journals. And what is most impressive to me, of all her awards, the International Creative Arts Award at the Polish Embassy. And I want to touch on that just for a minute, because of the poets in our collection that I've made from all the poets in Grand Rapids, there's 16 of us, I think, that I collected. I'm hoping to get that published soon. I've got the money now. But anyways, 2 of the poets in that collection have, I guess what you would say, made the immigrant circle journey the business of. Now, not everybody in America is there. If you're Native American, obviously your home, and most people don't know this is your home. If you're African American, you probably have a very different pattern from most Europeans, even though there is a way to make the journey back and recover things that were lost. But for a great number of Americans, there's that business of people that were leaving their homeland in need, came here, made a life here, left part of their family behind in the old country, half their traditions, their language, all the rest of that. Carmen Bugan, my former student who has won the Bakeless Award this year, is a Romanian that escaped from Ceausescu's tyranny and has made the journey back to discover what had happened to her father when they were still living there. Linda has taken the journey back in her Amber Necklace from Gdansk, which I think is probably one of the 2 or 3 best poetry books I've read in the last 20 years. Don't mean to slight any of your other books. She comes back. She finds the old family members left behind. She finds the culture left behind. She doesn't shy away from the dark sides of her country's history. She goes to Auschwitz. she really makes us stop and think about not only the beauties and the ironies of that journey and what it is to be an American, but she also confronts some of the things that are difficult in our own heritage, if that makes sense. And so without further ado, Linda.
Oh, well, thank you for all being, thank you. And especially for David Cope. I mean, what a week this has been. Oh, wow. I'm so grateful to be here, and a pleasure to read with two great poets, Miriam Peterson and Lou Klee. Miriam, I've known you for so long, I can't remember a time when I didn't know you, but probably when I was 5 in Cleveland, I didn't know you. But it's a real honor to read with you, dear friend, and an honor to read with Lou, a new friend. I'm going to do something I rarely do. I'm going to dedicate my reading tonight to a dear friend, Richard Jansma, who is not here. He died many years ago, about over 20 years ago now, 89, 90. And it's really because of him I'm standing in front of you. Back in 1973, when I was just a recent graduate from Aquinas, I wasn't really writing poetry, but I heard about free, not readings, they were free poetry workshops, community workshops at the Village Bookstore in Easttown on Wealthy. And I decided to check it out, me with my little scraps of poems, my little journal. And I met Dick Jansma, who really changed my life and encouraged me and told me to keep writing and keep revising and reading, and encouraged me to go to grad school to get my MFA. And also that same day I met him, I met David Cope and Eric Rinke. So what a journey it's been, friends. What a journey to this day, so thank you. I have obsessions, and I write about them. Sense of place, family history, which David touched on, art, visual art, movies, and all the poems I'm going to read to you today are, touch on those themes. So I'm going to start with just a couple of poems from my book, Amber Necklace from Gdansk. And this poem is titled Doppelganger. I'm sure we all know about that theory that there's someone else in the universe that maybe is just like us, our twin. And it touches on that idea. There's just one geographical name you need to know about, Oswiecim. It's a town in southern Poland, west of Krakow, and the Germans call it Auschwitz. So when you hear the town, you'll know where it is. Doppelganger. Somewhere she must exist, my other self, lost twin I've never met, only imagined. The mirrored image of a familiar stranger, smoking a cigarette in a Krakow bar, walking along a gray dock in Gdansk, hanging laundry in a cramped yard anywhere between the Tatra Mountains and the Baltic Sea. A mere roll of the dice that I'm here and she's somewhere else, someone else, with my face, pale skin, hair streaked blonde on brown. So many of my family decided to stay in the old world. It's amazing I cropped up in the new, surrounded by microwaves, CD-ROMs, enough guilt to fill a baseball field because of a simple act of birth that placed me in the suburbs south of Cleveland and not in a town across the river from Oswiecim. A toast to my other half. May we each have a long life on opposite sides of the world. May we never recognize each other on the street. David mentioned Auschwitz, and I was there once with my husband and daughter. I think everyone on the planet should go there, but you only need to go there once. This is a prose poem from Amber Necklace, and it begins with me talking about my maiden name. My name is Linda Nemec Foster. My maiden name is Nemec, but the original name was Niemiec, N-I-E-M-I-E-C. If you just put two I's in front of the two E's, you have it. and it's the Polish word for German. And when World War II started and Poland was invaded September 1st, 1939 by Germany, my family in Cleveland decided to change the name because they didn't want their Polish neighbors to think they were German. So they changed it to Nemec. But this poem starts out talking about that name, but it ends in Auschwitz. And I mentioned Joseph Mengele. And if you don't know history, let me just say he was the quote-unquote doctor at the camp who performed not great acts of mercy, but horrific experiments on some of the inmates at Auschwitz. Mengele's butterflies. On the red-eye overnight Lufthansa flight nonstop from Chicago to Frankfurt, I am surrounded by the clipped staccato of German, and I'm reminded of my name, my real maiden name, Niemiec, which is Polish for German. Linda Niemiec, Linda Deutsch, Linda German. A guy from Albany, New York once told me the mythical origins of my name. When the mainly Slavic tribes were confronted for the first time by Germanic tribes, they, of course, couldn't understand what was being said. The Germans tried speaking louder and wildly gesticulating. They thought this would get their ideas across. The Slavs just thought the Germans were mad or maybe deaf and couldn't hear a thing without shouting. So Niemiec has its roots in the word mute for the Slavic languages. At least that's what the guy in Albany told me. And maybe that's why Hitler and Stalin ultimately never hit it off, despite that bankrupt non-aggression pact they signed in 1939, the pact that signaled the beginning of the end for Poland and, in a larger sense, for Germany and Russia, too. I think Hitler always suspected Stalin of being a Jew. As a matter of fact, he even had his official state photographer go to Moscow before Hitler ever met Stalin and take close-up photos of Stalin's earlobes to see if they were connected, that is Aryan, or disconnected and separate, that is Jewish, according to the current racial theories espoused by the Nazis. The photographer did his job with complete discretion, of course, and Hitler pronounced Stalin's earlobes connected and Aryan. So, Slavic ears were spared, but not Slavic eyes. The notorious angel of death at Auschwitz, Dr. Joseph Mengele, had a fascination for Jewish and Slavic eyes, along with his obsession for twins. Blue and brown were beautiful but too commonplace. What really excited him was the rare hazel and even rarer green. On the walls of his office at Auschwitz were meticulous rows of colors that rivaled gorgeous butterflies, their colors an array of variations of blue, brown, green, violet, black. Their colors created from the preserved irises of his victims. Eyes of the Jew from Warsaw, the Pole from Tarnow, the Gypsy from Budapest, the homosexual from Prague. And I think of my mother's mother, with her jet black hair and olive skin, looking not Slavic or Germanic, but different. As if Hitler, with his penchant for earlobes, could uncover the secret of what it is that sets us apart from one another. My mother's mother, who looked different enough to be noticed, leaving for America before the Holocaust began, her skin on her back, her green eyes alive and intact. My family history in about 5 stanzas, all you need to know, from my great-grandfather on. Family tree. There was the rain in the mountains of southern Poland, Nowy Sącz, the small town caught in history's time warp. Late 1800s, and are we in Prussia or Austria? What country defines this culture of peasants? My great-grandfather, the only blacksmith in a village where horses outnumber people. There was the dense forest of intense birdsong, my grandfather straining to understand the language of dusk. Sparrows with their dull gray coats complaining about the old world and its tight shoes. Get out, they sing in unison to the man who gambles on a one-way ticket to Ellis Island, bribes the girl in the next village to meet him in 2 years. Underneath the orange sky above the steel mills of Cleveland, say Cuyahoga, he tells her, as if it were a river that ran through her heart. There was the exotic smell of India ink on my father's fingers when he came home from work. Assembling printing presses as big as garages, he forgot the sound of words as they left the page. He was only interested in the machine's end result, capturing letters on an inked roller surface. By the time he died, he lost the language of village and rain. There was the echo of I am, the confused ego of the immigrant's granddaughter as she navigates the new world. She has never known the language of the old, and she wants to be nothing but American, ageless, classless. She negotiates a history, the compromise of opposites, how to immigrate from one world to another without realizing it. She leaves her impression, her empty outline on every major street in America, home of the brave, last image of an anthem. There was the unrehearsed arrival of the sun, urban and urbane. No hint of the rain in the mountains, the fog forgetting itself. He knows only one language and uses it to reinvent the past. No history, only now. College and small rooms. He'll visit the mountains of Nova Sanche once and then instantly misplace them. A postcard in the very bottom drawer. I was so moved by Kim Weingarten's poems about Eastern Europe and Central Europe. It has seen so much history. This is a true story, and I wish it wasn't. When I mention hair, I don't mean this hair, I mean the musical Hair. Remember the age of Aquarius? What happens in the age of Aquarius? Peace, love, and understanding, everyone living in harmony. The old hippies remember that, and the new hippies too. But this is a performance of Hair in Sarajevo. Report from Bosnia, Hair performed in Sarajevo. The age of Aquarius is sung in broken English to a packed house in a small room. The actors do not take off their clothes at the play's finale. We're already naked from the war, one singer says. But they ask the audience to sing and join them on a tiny stage. They perform only when there's electricity. More than a dozen performances have been interrupted or stopped because of mortar shells. The artistic director, who also doubles as the bass guitarist, plays with the gun strapped to his waist, black revolver stolen from the cold grip of a dead Serb. A young boy sitting on his mother's lap in the fourth row smiles for the camera. My name begins with A, he says through an interpreter, just like Aquarius. Next week, he will be killed with 8 others standing in line for bread. At his grave, there is only his picture nailed to a wooden board. No name. They've run out of letters. Well, let's move on to something different. I was really impressed with Todd Konenko's work, who read here a couple of nights ago, and I told him I was going to read this poem. Unfortunately, he had to teach a night class, so he's not here. But he had these ongoing poems about the B movie, the B movie part 1, part 2, the B movie. Well, I don't want to say this is like an A poem, but this is about an A movie, Fellini's La Dolce Vita. And it does mention Jesus, so here we are, Holy Week. I got to mention Jesus, not in the way my mother would want. But anyway, at the beginning of La Dolce Vita, when the credits are rolling, there's a statue of Jesus, and he's being airlifted with a helicopter with cables to the Vatican. they're putting him on, some building. So he's, flying around. And people, of course, it's all dubbed like, it's Jesus, the subtitles. So anyway, when I talk about that, that little helicopter ride, you know what I'm referring to. And all you need to know, even if you've never seen the movie, you don't need to know anything about the movie because it's all here in the poem. And I talk about Marcello Mastroianni, Anouk Aimée, who are in the movie, and Anita Ekberg. And if you don't know anything about Anita Ekberg, just think Anna Nicole Smith with talent. Va-va-boom. Right? All right? So this is called Absurdity of the Sweet Life. Todd, this is for you. In the living room, my television blares. This evening's movie, complete and uncut, is Fellini's classic, La Dolce Vita. I stand in the kitchen, fixing dinner, the usual. Boiled potatoes, green beans, meatloaf. Getting the beans washed takes precedence over Jesus flying through the skies of Rome, arms lifted. Now, Marcello and Anouk screw in a whore's flooded apartment, and I'm still in the kitchen. I don't even see Anita's big entrance. Is her blonde hair up? Is she wearing dark glasses? I overhear a question from the Italian press. Is it true you take a bath every morning in ice-cold water without any clothes on? Actually, from the movie. Her tremendous breasts, they're all thinking, could heat up anything. The television's still blaring when my husband comes home from work. He forgets about dinner, about his hunger, about his anxious day as he sits mesmerized by Anita. Her flowing blonde hair, black strapless gown, those breasts. Now she aimlessly wanders the night streets of Rome with Marcello at her heels and a white kitten on her head. She's in love with the kitty, not poor Marcello, and places it on her fair scalp, its tiny tail brushing her forehead. My husband is certain there's going to be a nude shot. As the dinner starts to burn and Anita finds a big fountain to plunge into, a big fountain her big tits can push out of, but nothing happens. The black, wet, strapless gown still clings. The body remains hidden. The dinner is ruined. My husband grumbles. Nothing happens. If Jesus could finish that helicopter ride and touch ground just once more, I wouldn't ask him to perform the miraculous, but only the ordinary, to land in front of the stove, finish stirring the beans and potatoes, and not forget to turn off the meatloaf so I could watch La Dolce Vita from beginning to end, not miss a second of some other life's sweetness. New work now. New work. I have another obsession. Obsession I talked about is visual art, and I really think I'm a frustrated visual artist, Ron. That's what I want to be. You. Kinda, but I do stick people instead. So the next two poems I'm going to read are based on visual art, and one is the famous artist Andy Warhol. It's an ekphrastic poem based on his art. A piece of his I saw on the DIA, Detroit Institute of Arts, and it was a double self-portrait, and that's what I entitled it, Double Self-Portrait, 1967. That's when he wrote it. That's when he did the piece. And it's a form, I decided to do a palindrome, which is basically a poem that is like a completely mirrored image of itself. It's sort of like coming and going. It's like the word auto, not the car, but the name O-T-T-O, same backwards and forwards. So that's basically what a palindrome is in poetry. And you'll hear it when I read it. It's in two parts. Double Self-Portrait, 1967, for Andy Warhol. 1. Where were you in 1967? I know where I was, in a cheap photo booth in Jersey, constantly reinventing myself, rehearsing the gesture, the parted hair, the vacuous eyes. Hello to the end, my era. Goodbye to the soul, the pale filament that can be Xeroxed in a blink of an eye. I'm the echo of a doppelganger's heart beating in the stranger's chest. 2. Beating in the stranger's chest, I'm the echo of a doppelganger's heart, Xeroxed in a blink of an eye, the pale filament that can be my era. Goodbye to the soul, the vacuous eyes. Hello to the end. Rehearsing the gesture, the parted hair, constantly reinventing myself in a cheap photo booth in Jersey, I know where I was. Where were you in 1967? The next poem is, based on a woman that taught me more than I could teach her, and she's not a famous artist. She was a homeless person who lived in a shelter here in Grand Rapids, and she was part of a community poetry workshop that I did. And as I said, she taught me much more than I could teach her. And this is based on one of her pieces, and she didn't have enough money to frame the piece with glass, so she used saran wrap to go over the painting, the piece. And it was a nativity scene. And the poem is in the form of a ghazal, ancient Persian form. All you need to know, it's in couplets. And here it is. Nativity scene encased in saran wrap for Nancy Ann Van Pelt. The carefully arranged scene, magi and camels, floating angel and stunned virgin, covered in thin plastic. I could tell you stories, she said, who's having sex with whom, and why Jesse uses men's ties to map the world. The universe as a cardboard box, backseat of a Dodge, motel room rented by the hour, thin smoke leaving her lips. In the beginning was a wordless conversation, nothing but syllables strung along the vast expanse of empty air. Well, yes. Well, no. Maybe. She doesn't think the answer strange, only the 3 boxes filled with his coughing. The self-taught artist never titles his pieces. Why bother? My art is all that mismatched stuff people throw away. She uses cuttings of her own hair to braid a heavy wall of dull brown. Memory, she calls it, or names of the lost. Quote, a woman who doesn't wear perfume has no future, unquote, said Paul Valery. Or perhaps it was his neighbor commenting on the rain. It's all connected, she says. The full manger and abandoned landscape, birth and resurrection, lilies of the field on Valium. A number of times I've invoked the name of Jack Riddle. Oh, Jack. And so this, and poems can come from everywhere. When we were talking in the panel, people would ask where poems come from, and this idea of a poem came from a funky article in the New York Times, and here's the quote. A 20-pound carp began to be slaughtered. Oh, a 20-pound carp about to be slaughtered began speaking in Hebrew, shouting apocalyptic warnings. That's the New York Times. We're not talking the National Enquirer. So that's from the Times, and it's got to be true. So since Passover is happening soon, I think on Saturday, I think it is. There's some Hebrew in this poem, and since Easter is on Sunday, there's like life after death in this poem too. So this is called A Sign from God for Jack Riddle. Now anything is possible. Next thing you'll tell me your dead father speaks to you through the distinct growl of your dog, Stafford. And there's the Clumber Spaniel now at the back door, channeling not the famous poet, but Dad, the famous basketball coach, barking out positions in the locker room, howling pleasure or disgust from the sidelines. You swear it's him, back from the dead, but you look down from your morning coffee and see only the family dog staring at you with half-open eyes, salivating tongue, wagging tail. Dad, Dad, you almost say, knowing in your head he's not there, panning away on the kitchen floor, but in your heart You want him to be like the miracle in New York, 30 miles from Manhattan, the talking carp pleading for his life in a kosher fish market, ready to be gunked on the head and made into gefilte fish for Sabbath dinner. Pleading for his life in Hebrew, what else? Shouting, and excuse my pronunciation of the Hebrew, shouting, Tzdruk Shemara Hasof Ba. Translation, get your act together and repent because the end is near. And it's not as if the fish is channeling the troubled soul of a dead rabbi, or that the two fish cutters at the New Square Fish Market are holy men ready to hear the word of God. One, a devout Gentile, the other, a middle-aged Hassid with one wife and 11 kids. It's only that you want to believe the dead will live again, in the open mouth of a 20-pound carp, in the soft breath of your klutzy pooch, the voice of your father as quirky and ominous as the voice of God, telling you to plant the garden now, before the clouds change colors, before it's time for dinner in the evening, the walk in the morning, now, before you start to fade like rain evaporating off patio furniture, like dusk dissolving into night, abandoned attics, empty garages. Before you forget the small movements a mouth makes as it forms each word around the quiet air. I want to end with 4 more poems. How would I do it for time? I think I'm okay. These 3 are from a new manuscript of prose poems I'm working on called Fragments from the New Europe, and I've never read them anywhere. So 3 very short prose poems. And they take place all over Europe, Berlin, Prague, Granada, Spain. And these 3 are from Poland. Man praying in a field. He could be dead, this man praying in the open field between Warsaw and Poznan. He doesn't merely kneel, but lies down and places his whole body against the body of the earth, as if he's listening for some small breath to match his own. This is how people must have prayed to their gods before the idea of God forced them into small country churches and ornate urban cathedrals, before the invention of pulpit and incense, and the creation of man on a ceiling in Rome. Here, there is only the hard earth and a man lying down to pray to it. He wears a dark suit, black shoes, his hands open in supplication. You cannot see his face, hidden as it is by the coarse wild grass he worships. Soon dusk will approach the man and call his name. Only then will he rise from his prayer as if startled from sleep. Barely remembering who he is, he walks away, each foot lightly touching the ground. Białystok is a city in eastern Poland. The maid at the hotel in Białystok. It takes her all day to make a bed. She does it in layers. First, strips the bed down to the mattress pad and lets it air out for several hours. The bed needs to breathe, she says. Breathe so that it can forget all the dreams left by the visitors from the night before. The professor from Lublin with his dreams of stone bridges, the banker from Warsaw with his pounding heart, the widow from the mountains who takes the spring snowfall wherever she goes. How can this bed forget them, their hair, their skin, the imprint of their bodies? The maid knows only time holds the answer. Several hours after stripping the bed, she puts down the fitted sheet. Several hours after that, she smooths down the flat sheet. Another several hours later, the large comforter smelling like the green of her backyard after the rain. And finally, the large square pillow is placed with careful precision at the head of the bed, exactly in the middle. Only then is the bed ready as it waits for the next dream, the dark rooms of an abandoned house that haunt the bureaucrat from Moscow, his wife as constant as a blank page. in the old town, Warsaw. In the center of the old town, the two police women talking constantly with their short miniskirts and black stiletto heels. The old woman with the hunched back and the iridescent red hair. The young child tethered with the yellow plastic harness. The bored street vendor selling collapsible, multicolored spheres filled with empty air. The man in the blue shirt comfortable with his armless torso. The homeless woman in the church vestibule feeling the wooden legs of the crucified Christ and wanting to believe they are real. The crippled man obsessively rubbing his fingers with holy water, and the effusive expatriate from America who used to live in Detroit and now owns a fashionable cafe. Hey, anyone can be anybody in this part of the reinvented world, he says to you with your borrowed map and constant stare. You should try it. And my last poem, thank you so much for your time and attention. And this goes back to Dick Jansma. He loved Mick Jagger. And I was inspired to read this not only because of Dick, but because of Rod Torreson's great poems yesterday about Chuck Berry and not really liking Elvis, but writing about Elvis. And I actually had an Elvis poem, and I don't like Elvis either. I actually had an Elvis poem I was going to end with, but I thought, no, this is Dick's night. And so, and it also dovetails with my love of movies, because it was inspired by Martin Scorsese's Shine a Light, his documentary on the Stones a couple of years ago. Great movie. So it begins with a great quote by Keith Richards. I mean, who else could, say this? And he says, "My life hasn't run out yet." Someone asked him in an interview, like, "Why aren't you dead? With all the drugs you've done?" He said, "My life hasn't run out yet." Unquote. So this is called The Talent of Knowing. In the poem, there are the great lines of one of my favorite Stone songs, "You Can't Always Get What You Want." It's the anthem of our era, I think, or my era. And I'm not going to sing it. I'm just going to say the words. Okay. The Talent of Knowing. I'm watching Mick Jagger's jagged face, as big as a 5-store tenement building at an IMAX theater showing Scorsese's film Shine a Light. And I get tired just watching this guy, older than me, methodically strut around the stage and dry hump the audience. Back and forth, back and forth. And that's when I think of you, dear friend, who's been dead for over 20 years. Not as long as Brian Jones, but hey, the years are creeping on all of us. And I remember your bigger-than-life-size poster of Mick by your bed, his thin, tense body on stage wrapped in sweat, almost nothing else. You envied that look of defiance, the petulant lips. Blasted, you can't always get what you want so loud, you swore the vinyl almost buckled from the sound waves. I saw her today at the reception. In her glass was a bleeding man. She was practiced at the art of deception. I could tell by her blood-stained hands. Another paradigm for the ex-wife you told me in a noisy bar. But as much as you craved Mick's swagger, it was the silent, elusive, almost invisible Charlie Watts you really wanted to channel. Look how he looks at Mick on stage. Just look. The almost sarcastic grimace that says, "I know that you know that I know you're a fake." Nothing more than a bloke who let his classes at the London School of Economics get to his head. And now look at you. You're nothing but fucking Mick Jagger, that's all. And that's what you tell me Charlie Watts is really thinking when he's banging on the drum sitting there, lips pursed behind Mick and the boys. When Scorsese's movie cuts from the 2006 concert stage to old black and white film clips of the Stones in their early days, it's the interview with the young Charlie Watts that I know you would love. When asked what he'd do if he wasn't in the band, he said, "I'd be a designer, not an artist, a designer because I'm not versed in the talent of knowing." A polite way to say a failure of the intellect, a failure of the imagination. As if he was mouthing your words in 1974 after the wife left with your best friend. "How could I not see it coming? How did I miss that?" you said. "I must be totally devoid of ideas." Jagged's poster on your your only bedtime companion, the black neighbors in the upstairs apartment pounding on their floor, your ceiling, almost keeping rhythm with Charlie yelling, "Turn off that lousy white music, white boy, it's damn crazy." You couldn't turn it off then, and you couldn't turn it off now. The movie and soundtrack, Jagger and his constant gyrations, Watts and his fixed stares, the nuance of every song memorized, your life finally abandoned in the glow of backlighting. Thank you.
It's been 4 incredible days. Lou, you get to end. You get to close the conference. I've only gotten to know Lou. I think you're one of those younger teachers that's going to carry this on after people like me are long retired. Lou works at Calvin, LS Clat at Calvin, and he brings them into our mix, which I've wanted to do right from the get-go. He has a long list of journal publications. That was the first thing that really blew me away. I've never seen anything quite like it. He has 2 books, Interloper and Cloud of Ink, and I expect great things from him in the future as well. Lou, it's all yours.
If you need to get something to drink or eat, there's lots to eat over there. I want to say thank you also to David Cope for a spectacular conference, and for all of you for coming out. Thank you, Linda, for that great reading, and Miriam. That was awesome. It's really a privilege to be in such good company. A 20-pound carp mouthing words of the apocalypse in Hebrew. I mean, this is a good definition of my poetry. So, but seriously, T.S. Eliot said that poets are occupied with frontiers of consciousness beyond which words fail, though meanings still exist. And I think, honestly, that's what we're all after, is to take you to the frontiers of consciousness. And I think artists do that as well. So I'm going to read a few poems from my first book, then several from Cloud of Ink, and then several poems from my newest manuscript, Sunshine Wound. And Miriam, I'm glad you read a heart poem, because I have a heart poem. Actually, 2. Arrhythmia. Grace, the aphrodisiac, riddles the bloodstream electric. Me sick, no, blessed is the jumpy heart, says Dr. Harvey, heartbeat enthusiast. The man with the lidocaine, defibrillator, and the cold silver stethoscope pressed to the flesh. Here's the skipping chestnut irregular, the cis-boom skitter beat, my adamant love palpitating immaculate, the dirty rush to judgment. Asides to my surgeon, tattooed arrow on my chest, a line of stitches to unzip. I felt you feeling around in my heart, and so what if it's thick? So what if it's old growth and a river bends through it? Where is the canoe, you asked, the birch bark and smoke? You reached for the whole tar nation, the wigwam, the peace pipe. I gave only a hint of direction. It was faint. Even so, you said, I smell blood. This next poem is set in Florida, in the Florida Keys. It's called Cruisers. I have such big feet. I cannot, I'm kicking this. I got to straddle here. Okay, let's see. I'll drive this thing. All right. Cruisers. The wave runners are tired, adrift in kelp. Men slumped over handlebars, gunslingers peering into quiet, derelict as the Portuguese man of war under their toes, Orphic. The friends have scuttled their tone and go with tears, sunburnt, forlorn, graphic. The sailboats have quit. The sun is almondine and sincere. Only the wedge of cormorants rounding the island. Only the hyssop of their wings. And forlornographic is not a word. Okay, but it wants to be a word. I'm from Ohio, so I can say these things. Ohio, I worry about your fences, wherein thousands of propane tanks stand breast to breast like white chickens. Chickens depend on wishbones, and their smelly parts set off alarms near Dayton. Those that range cross I-75 where they are struck now and then by airstreams. So much attention here given to the tornado. I would like to add that when threatened, chickens retreat into silos. It makes sense if it's true that Ohio is the birthplace of flight. Whippoorwill. The Blue Ridge in West Virginia. Mist covers the whole sleepy thought of it, including the deer, its black lips sewn shut with piano wire. Now we have the beginning of a hollow in which a piano tuner searched for but failed to find the Holy Ghost. The longer mystified, the more he was inclined to silence. There is a thought that one can hear the whippoorwill in the muzzle of a gun. I never believed that. Affliction. I am painting this house with water, dipping my brush in clarity. And if I told you this house is an aquarium, and if I told you the house is buoyant, would you see through it? My house underwater seems misshapen, and given its tonnage, grotesquely immersed. Come to the window, moon jellyfish, parachute of tentacles to outer space. Recreation. Cloud, you drift above Minnesota, a thunderhead in the sky, unmapped by meteorologists. You who watch below the liquid Minnesotans and send your glass assassins to the rusty, have also opened a rest area for Winnebagos, which caravan into heaven. Cloud of our ancestors, welcome now the suburbans, for they consume the golden prairie, and they wash in the Mississippi as if the river of life. That happens to me all the time, so it's no big deal. Where my sunflower wishes to go. And David Cope, big fan of Allen Ginsberg, and sunflowers were a big part of his poetry, so maybe this is in some way an homage to him. A goldsmith hammered a sunflower out of recycled trinkets. It howled because it was tasteless, because it was brassy. It could not turn to the sun like other heliotropes. So the sun had pity on the yard ornament and melted it down with ardor. And the goldsmith soaked his hands in the liquefaction, and they hardened. In this condition, he discovered a finch laying an egg in a trash can. He could handle neither the bird nor the egg with his welded fingers. But the yolk beneath the blue enamel of the sky made him happy. It cast his silhouette on the sidewalk while bees trampled it with mellifluous feet. This next poem comes from a true story about Charles Darwin. In fact, it's a story he told himself about being in the jungle collecting specimens, because that's what Darwin did. He was collecting beetles. And he had one in his left hand, and he had another in his right hand, and then he came upon another beetle. So what do? Right? He put one in his mouth, okay, and he reached for the third beetle. And, he had to have it, right? The beetle in his mouth secreted a nasty chemical. He spit it out, and he lost all of the beetles. And I think that's just something about the appetite of science, right? And you got to have that appetite to be a scientist, right? But sometimes maybe the appetite is too much. So this is called Darwin's Mouth, and it takes that story as its starting point, and then it goes to, like most of my poems, a very strange place. Darwin's Mouth. And out of the mouth the beetle rides an acrid river of spittle. Having embittered the palate, it returns to the rainforest, a rare specimen with 3 sets of wings. One covers the face, one the feet, and with the last it flies. The scarab hides a lantern in the banana leaf, where it waits considering suitors for its jade light. No matter the jaguar or the sloth, the beetle recesses into sanctum, and, all but forgotten, finds itself next to impossible. I used this word before in a poem. The title of this next poem is called Liquefaction. Which not only means the process of liquefying, but also it's an old word meaning passion, ardent devotion. This is called liquefaction. I found an octopus in the snow, and not knowing what it was or why it was there, I gutted it as if a hunter. To me, up to my elbows in bladder, the ink was a surprise. I wore it like opera gloves in the moonlight. So many mistook my passion for gangrene. One followed me into an orchestra pit. If I could only say now what my arms said. I took up a bassoon and aimed it at a chandelier. As the house lights came down, the audience lost their places. They were swimming in a maelstrom of inklings. You can laugh, it's all right. This next poem is based upon a number of paintings by Andrew Wyeth. And how do you sum up somebody's life? The title is taken from the Andrew Wyeth's obituary title. It's simply Andrew Wyeth, painter, dies at 91. A weathered barn on a hilltop. A nude woman sprawled on the slope below. A giant squid rises out of a hayfield, and the barn is compassed in tentacles, then a cloud of ink. A man with a fountain pen in his hand and a pitchfork in his back walks the cow path around the barn and tells the beauty on the hill to step to it. It's as if her freckled skin is newly charcoaled and the hayloft a smokescreen. The cows can't be heard for certain within the ink blot, but deer creep to the edge of the field on delicate feet. And as far as I know, Andrew Wyeth never painted a giant squid. What's that? In the middle of Christina's world, right. And there's Helga there and that as well. For lack of a better word, afraid in the neighborhood, afraid in the body, your tongue pursues the meadowlark, the hinterlands. The lark is not really present there, not even its tracks, as the artist claims, but your tongue is as good as a footprint. Small comfort, since the piranha also sleeps on red velvet, and many terrible winged things, such as seraphim, will follow you to the clearing. If you could speak plainly out in the open, you would never paint your tongue. Sanctuary. There's something burning in the thicket. I run to it with a recorder at first blush of indigo. The pair of buntings netted in brambles. I hear their cries. I want their wounds. Is life worth living? Maybe. The hidden life. The bower seems another guidebook with green leaves. So as Ulysses S. Grant is folded in my wallet, I will go intrepidly into thicket. For U.S. has engulfed me, but not consumed me. This next poem inspired, unfortunately, by a friend's suicide, and if you've experienced that, and many of us have and will, you're completely outside the world of the person who commits suicide. Often they don't confide in you about it, and this next poem is about that experience of being shut out, and I can only imagine how horrible it was for her. Weightless in the void, a friend went dark. Because a friend took her life, and in doing so made me a stranger, I became a blue astronaut. For the astronaut, in straying from the failsafe, takes into space a lifeline, whereas the suicidal friend sundered without. And what she thought in the dark had no relation to me, nor did it coincide. Today, the Columbine opens to a bombardment of photons, if this is light, whereas the blue astronaut spacewalks. It has a reason, this absence of light, and I carry a manufactured light with me. My friend did not open like the Columbine, whose petals are spurs, crimson in the cutthroat of light. Dooms of Balm. The title of this poem comes from Emily Dickinson, so you can't go wrong, right? The earth is covered in lilacs. Corals in the lilac sea mean brains are thinking of bee balm. When deadheads last perfumed, there was a purple discharge, then a gratitude. We sleep knowing we may be ambushed by a lilac dream. But the sun is a friend, our ultraviolet friend. To make a synthetic grief out of lilacs is not to feel purposeless. St. Francis, I carry a calf in my hand. It has a handle and a secret compartment. I set it down in an amphitheater where the new Romans assemble. They have ways of caressing my livestock, though a little too familiar. I suspect a wisdom lives in the hide of the calf, which requires a fetish. What is the cure for an excessive love of animal? The afterlife turns flesh to grass and grass to cowslips, and there is always the chance of a blue sky. The head of George Washington. I don't think the head of George Washington gets enough credit. The head of George Washington, largely forgotten except for portraits where the face is powdered, the cheeks rosy, and excluding busts on which phrenologists have digressed, lies under a cherry tree. The snow has gone to ridiculous lengths to conceal it, but his aquiline nose is a telltale sign that the globe is warming. And truly, the 7 icebergs, like wise men, wander from their calving to approach the sweet lips of the revolutionary. In their quiet way, the bergs describe a journey over gridlock into a heretofore unimaginable cloudburst, which melts them and makes them seem like Holsteins grazing on hilltops. Into the valley the 7 verge, keeping an eye out for monuments and rivers of children, while the head, ensconced in fallen fruit, looks like it wants to speak. What would it say? Here's another president. I don't know where these presidents are coming from. One whose soul the Titan has fashioned. The brain fails. Brain, why do you fail? For in idealizing the footprints of William Howard Taft among the cow pies, and undoubtedly he must have walked in pastures, you must sense that he is no longer with us, that enormous man, our largest president, who nevertheless stands the test of time. For here you are with outsized footnotes that have tracked across the internet. A multitude of endangered animals have left similar traces on stamp collections owned by gods, not fleas. It's gardening season, so this one's for the gardeners. Hardship. The gardener hits the deer in the head with a shovel, and the deer, stunned, takes a step forward, then collapses into the embrace of the gardener. And the gardener, unsure, lets go of the implement and grabs the animal around the neck, and the breath, which is wet, strikes him on the cheek. Together they fall into a bed of jonquils, and there they lie for the better part of a lifetime. The surprising weight of the deer pressing harder and harder into the embrace, and the gardener beside himself, stroking the speckled hide and calling out for someone, anyone, to peel back the scalp and inject a memory of himself as he once was, selfish, without a bedfellow. The elk hunters. They drive their, I don't have anything against hunters. I know it sounds like, I don't know. The elk hunters. They drive their Toyota and crash it into the beard of the forest. The elk head in the truck bed joins the other heads and locks horns, as if this concerto is manufactured. The jawbone of the timber mangles the radio first, now the metal. Each of the hunters was once a masticator of letters, every last one tender-hearted. And Miriam, you read something with forsythia in it, and they've been in bloom, and I love it when the forsythia come, and this somehow has nothing to do with this poem, but there is a forsythia in here. Mortified and standing at the sink, I squeeze a tube and brush my teeth with forsythia. My yellow teeth are seed corn I will plant in rows bedside. Come morning, the ears will be loaded on a train that makes mincemeat of train tracks. Eyes, nose, set aside. So, as the mouth is the only thing left of my face, forget this smile, impossibly placid, on which I sail the newsprint of a paper boat. I'm going to read just two more. And this is my Jesus poem called The Carnivores. The Carnivores. Then Jesus took off his sugar coat and walked into the wild like an aborigine. There he met beast upon beast that beheld him, and he countermanded them, turning their appetites into his flesh. Their tongues became deviled meat, stored under the roof of his mouth. For he spoke in parables. And the hyena, caked in blood, dreamed of a wedding cake. I'm not sure why. Okay? And I'll end with this. Oops. The invitation. The clouds, black with the night, are winded, perpetually winded. A man in a wetsuit crawls across the lake, and he's not a bush pilot, though the interior is dark, and it seems as if he's discovering zero. And he's not a mountaineer, though he traverses. The crevasse of the journey cannot keep the man from the other side. The distance is deceptive, as is the detachment with which he dips his ungloved hands like spoons into coffee. Because the lake is sensuous. Because the infinite wants him. Thank you very much.
Well, I got two final thoughts and two directives, so if you'll be patient for a moment. It's Poetry Month, right? April is the cruelest month. 15 years ago today, my dear friend of 20 years, Allen Ginsberg, died. April is the cruelest month. I was one of the last people he called of his friends, and he called everybody to say goodbye. This is how enlightened this man was. I was asleep. I got the message on the answering service. In the morning, his bibliographer called me and said, "Are you standing up?" I knew what the hell it was. April is the cruelest month. That's the first of the meditations. The second one is to go back where we began, or maybe almost to where we began when we talk about poetry in the English language. When that April with his shoulders sota, the drought of March hath pierced to the rota, and bathed every vein and switch liquor, of which virtue engendered is the floor. When Zephyrus with his sweet breath in spirit hath in every holt and hath the tender crop is, and the younger son hath in the ram is alve corsi runna. Then smaller fullest maken melodia, that sleeping all the east with open ear. So pricketh him natura in your courage, the longing folk to go on pilgrimage. and palmers for the second strange strandes to fern halves and sundry lundes. Now, I could go on, but that's good enough. Right? I've memorized about 45 lines, but we'll let it go. Chaucer begins this for us, and I could go back to the Old English, you know, but you want to, the Germanic language, it's wonderful stuff. This has been a hell of a journey for me, and I think for most of the people who've been on it with me all this week. I have two final directives, and then we're going to call this baby quits. I'm going to put a big old bow tie on it and say we got it done. All right, two things. I need to have you fill out the forms because this is for the grant, right? We got to get an idea of what's going on. Secondly, from my time when I was a student at the University of Michigan, we had a regular pattern because I knew, well, students are poor, simplest way to put it. We would go to university events very much like this one, and I call it a university event because that's one of the things that makes our community college not like a lot of community colleges because we have these convocations. We would go to university events, and we knew there would be food on the tables, right? And we would bring our baggies. You get to the table, and right? Then when you get done, you pull out the baggie, scoop it in. You got something for the next day. All right, now, it's not like that anymore. I could tell you other stories about how Sue and I figured out how to get free things. Probably the worst was when I gave blood to get cigarettes every 4 weeks, but that's another story. The food at our tables here tonight cannot go back to where it is, and I encourage you to take some with you. It's not something you have to do on the sly. Thank you.